Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. Today's guest is Paul Rowland, who is a Chester-based paranormal investigator who also likes to invent and make his own ghost hunting equipment. That's something that fascinates me because there's so much stuff out there on the market. Let's be honest, the market has been saturated in recent years with ghost hunting equipment. Some of it vastly overpriced for what it does, but they know that it will sell. So they're able to stick such a steep markup on it, really. But I'm always interested in people that make their own because, it's those kind of pieces of equipment that will probably be more true to what they're used for and probably can be more trusted. And you probably all know my opinion now on mobile phone apps and those kind of pieces of equipment that can be easily manipulated and easily falsified. I'll be sure to talk to Paul about that actually during the interview to get his opinion on that as well. But don't forget that my second book, Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator, is now for sale. You can get the ebook and the paperback version from Amazon, or you can contact myself to send you a signed copy should you wish. But also I'm going to be giving away a copy, as I did with the last book a few times. I'll be doing so with the new book. So I'm going to be running a little bit of a competition, and we're going to talk more about that in the outro. But we'll be running a bit of a friendly competition, really, for those that wish to enter. And the prize will be a signed copy of my new book, Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator. And what I've tried to do in the new book, as I'm sure I've explained before, is I've broken down experiences into subcategories. I've managed to do it into 6 categories, and it's quite detailed on what each category is and the experiences that are involved with each one. And it's taken that kind of new beginner, that new starter on a journey from the first book. And that's the idea behind it. But there are plenty of experiences in there, plenty of stories as well, both first-hand from myself as well as from fellow investigators that I've spoken to and investigated with. So be sure to stick around for the outro part of this episode where I'll be outlining the competition and how you guys can enter to win that. Also, don't forget, on Spreadshirt, I have a shop where you can purchase any Paranormal Paradigm merchandise. You can get yourself a mug, you can get yourself a hoodie, or I think even a sofa cushion, should you wish. And if there's nothing on there, if it's something on there that's not for sale, it's something that you want, just let me know. Or I think you can even design your own on there with the logo as well. So don't forget to head over there and get yourself a Paranormal Paradigm podcast coffee mug. I've got one. The quality is actually quite good, and I rather enjoy drinking my coffee out of a mug that has my podcast logo on. I think it's great. So go get yourself a mug and drink out of it in front of other people, and hopefully they'll ask all about the podcast and we can get some more listeners, which is always a good thing. Before we get to this show's interview with Paul, I just wanted to talk through a piece of equipment that I've recently purchased. I purchased it from Karen Frey, who you may remember was on a few episodes back. She is part of the Keep On Chatting network. She runs that. She also runs the Keep Paranormal group. A really fantastic lady who does a lot to support me with my other show, the Collective Conspiracy Show, hosting it on the Keep On Chatting network. Do head over to the Keep On Chatting network. That's spelled KEAP. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Facebook. And there are some fantastic shows on there, of course, my own included. But there were some other shows, some really good shows. Shadow Chasers with Dave and Jess, who were on episode 31. And there's Gary Fields, who's a medium. He does a good show, the Open Mic Hour, where people go on and talk about anything relating to the paranormal. And they stream live. So if you subscribe to the Facebook group or you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get them live and you can interact with the hosts as the shows progress. It's a really good network and a really good thing that she's got going there. But she's been selling off some of her equipment, as people do. You kind of want to upgrade and you want to get some new pieces of equipment in your kit bag. And I purchased a spirit board. And it's a spirit board that was made by her partner, Eddie. And what I like about it is it involves no contact whatsoever where a glass is concerned. So it's a square board, and the words and the numbers are circular, and there's on each side of the board there's about a 2-3 inch strip of copper wire on each side of the square. And the idea is that you'll have 4 people participating, and they will put a finger or 2 fingers on the piece of copper on their side of the board, and then that copper runs beneath the board into the center of the board, where it then attaches to I guess you could call it a hand, kind of like if you picture a clock face with a hand that kind of comes out, and that hand spins round. You can move it around, but the idea is that your energy is conducted through the copper and then moves the hand on the board and takes it to whatever letter or whatever number it is that the spirit is trying to communicate with you. So they use your energy to go through the copper. Of course, copper being an extremely conductive material, and then it will move the arm, I guess you could call it, around the board. It's a fantastic idea. It's one I've never seen before. I'm sure they're out there, but I've never come across it. And I remember using it at an investigation that we went on with Karen and thinking it was a brilliant idea because, of course, it removes so many possibilities of people either potentially manipulating it or purposely manipulating a spirit board with the glass and moving it around if they want to be a bit mischievous or if they want to kind of lead the group on. And it also prevents the ideometer phenomenon where people might be moving the glass subconsciously without knowing it. So it removes all of that from the whole experiment and relies really on energy and conductivity of that energy. I think it's a really, really good idea, and I'm really excited to get out there and start using it again. And I'll try and remember to take a picture, and I'll upload it to the Facebook group for you guys to see, because it's a fantastic piece of work. I mean, Eddie's done really well designing it. And another thing that Eddie does is he works on things like old spirit boxes, spirit radios, and he designs them to a particular era, so instead of standing there with a very modern 21st century type spirit box, he will design it so it looks like a 1940s radio or whatever. And the idea being that the spirits that you're interacting with can recognize it as something from their era. So they might be more prone to interact with it if it's a piece of equipment that they recognize. And he's also now looking at children's toys, so children's trains and things like that, and turning them into REM pods, which I think is a fantastic idea again, because it can almost be used as a trigger object. Children might be more prone to approaching a child spirit, might be more prone to approaching a train or a little toy as they might be to approaching just a silver box or something they might not recognise as it's a very modern device. So some really good ideas out there at the moment, and I'm really happy to have purchased that spirit board from them, and I'll keep an eye on the REM pods that he's making in the future as well, and the spirit boxes, because I think they're fantastic pieces of equipment that he manages to work on. But anyway, let's get on with the show. So as I say, tonight's guest, Paul Rowland. It's going to be a really interesting show, really keen to talk about the equipment side of things as well. So let's get on with it, and I hope you enjoy it. And it's my pleasure to welcome Paul. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Kieran. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's great to have you. I came across you through Dave and Jess from Shadow Chasers. You did a show with them recently.
I've done a show with them and some minor investigation work. They visited the Old King's Head in Chester, so I've met them.
Yeah, and it's I watched that interview and I thought I've got to get this guy on. I think we've got a lot in common, and here you are. So thank you very much for coming on. So as you just mentioned there, you do some investigations in Chester. It's not my favourite place in the UK. It's a close second, just behind York. Yeah, and it is because of the history. And, I always call Chester a mini York. So for the listeners, if you've never been to either of those places, if you're living in America and you do get the chance to come over, do visit Chester. It's a fantastic place, steeped in history. And the pub that you mentioned, the Ye Old King's Head, I actually remember sitting in there with my wife and having a pint, and seeing a flyer on the table advertising ghost hunts.
Yes.
And earmarking it for something I would like to have done in the future. He's never got around to it. So are you affiliated with that place so you get to investigate there? Is it just you that gets to investigate there?
No, I've got a small team with me, but it all started quite a few years back. I used to investigate alongside with public at another place called Plas Teg in North Wales, which will be known to quite a lot of people. And during one of those investigation evenings, the landlord of the King's Head, the old King's Head, came along to Plas Teg and saw me and remembered me as this guy with all this strange kind of kit and equipment that he'd never seen before. He was quite interested in paranormal. He was starting to go to a few events. And at just around that time, he was buying the pub. Anyway, scroll on a few months, about 6 months, he got the pub up and running, was running a couple of paranormal events for himself, and I got invited along through a friend. Those investigations didn't last for very long, only for financial reasons, really. And I've never stopped going to the pub once. He gave me an open invitation, and I have literally been going there for about 8 years now, wow. on average once a week, with groups of friends, not large groups. We've done public investigations, early evening investigations, and the pub is changing once again now with the lockdown conditions. The landlord, Harry, has took the brave decision to install cameras everywhere, all the rooms. So whereas the pub used to be, where the pub used to be open for people to stay overnight as a hotel, that's all out the window now because there are cameras in every guest room. And that there's going to be about 20 cameras, and they are going to be able to record either 24/7 or motion activated recordings, nighttime, daytime. And plus, alongside, I put in some specialised lighting equipment and detection equipment in places. But that will be open to the public and groups to come along and investigate for themselves.
Right, and I remember, you'll definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but something about the pub, and it claimed to be the oldest pub in England or something like that. Am I right there? Am I wrong?
No, there is actually a pub in Chester with an older claim to fame than that. Chester, its history is it was first occupied by the Romans, so just after AD 72, 73. So it was a major port. So the actual area that the pub was built on has got Roman connections. I have found out just recently there was a major walkway to cross over the river. Right. So there is a lot of history there. I'm hoping a friend of mine comes through with more history work for local history groups. So I hope you'll be able to find out more.
And is that something, when you've done your investigations, has that come across in your findings, the Roman kind of side of things?
Only once. I would hope it would have come through more. We did do a call out many, many years ago, and I got a reaction on a piece of audio equipment, real-time reaction, when I asked out if there were any Roman soldiers in the area. It was possibly a voice, but I can't remember now. It was a long time ago. And just recently, we've started asking out again if there's any Romans with us. We don't really get much response. There's always hope for the future. The one that we have made more of a connection with was a photograph I took, was a Civil War soldier. I took a photograph, and there's a semi-transparent figure, and he was identified by someone, not me, independent from me. You can tell he's wearing light armoured clothing from the Civil War era. Wow. So that's an interesting one.
And have you ever considered I've got Latin tattoos, but I'm not very good at speaking Latin. Have you ever considered doing something like that, talking the language that the Romans would understand, maybe?
I put an app on my phone once, which I didn't think was brilliant, but it was a voice converter from one language to another, and you could put an English phrase in and convert it to Latin. It would speak it out. It's possibly something we should do more of. I agree with your idea. It's definitely something.
Yeah, we've just had a lot of a lot of kind of positive experiences doing stuff like that. Playing Vera Lynn in a particular location where there was a lot of 1940s type history there, and we have had a lot of responses there. So I was just thinking it's something you could consider. So when you talk about the photos that you've captured and the pieces of equipment that you make, I'm really keen to talk about this. What made you want to start building your own equipment? Because there's so much out there on the market, almost too much stuff, and yet it can cost an arm and a leg. But that's what everybody goes for. So what made you kind of step away from that and go, no, I'm going to make my own stuff?
Well, this goes back to our good old friends on Most Haunted. When I first started watching that, as every one of us did, I used to like the programme, but I was always very frustrated about the lack of results, but especially the lack of use of technology and the lack of use of relevant technology. Lots of people, for example, I'm sorry about this, but use K2 meters. They are very sensitive bits of kit, but they've only got 5 LEDs to tell you what they detect.
Yeah.
Can't tell the difference between a main signal, a telephone signal, or a ghost or a spirit standing next to you because you only got 5 LEDs. I did a modification on one for a colleague of mine and hooked it up to an audio amplifier. You could then tell whenever it detected anything, you could hear what the sound was, and that makes a big difference because a true paranormal investigator wants to rule out known causes of effects, especially on a K2. And a lot of them, trust me, a lot of them are phone signals because modern cell phones, they talk to the cell masts regularly, and that makes the K2s trip. When you've got an audio amplifier hooked up to it, you hear that sound, you know what it is. Now, ironically, we had a very interesting event at Great Castle many years ago, where I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
Yeah.
Done a few investigations there, caught a couple of audio EVPs there, which are very interesting. But we used this K2 meter with the audio amplifier. And at the time, the castle had got no mains electricity anywhere near it, probably a mile away from the nearest mains electricity. Yet we heard very unusual, screechy electromagnetic sounds with the K2 meter hooked up, proving that the K2 has got capability, it's just not utilised properly. So anyway, it was because of Most Haunted, I wanted to use unusual, different, better technology. So I started out thinking, what do I want to do? How do I want to improve? So video lighting, I wanted to improve, which I've only made little inroads into that. But photography lighting has been much more successful. So I use pulse. So it's a digital pulse light. And I use primarily ultraviolet and blue light because they're the strongest colours of light. Although ultraviolet's not strong to our eyes, technically it's got more energy than any other colour of light. Mm-hmm. Combine that with a good quality digital SLR mounted on a tripod, 3-second exposure. And that's how I've managed to capture photographs that I'm 100% believe they are ghosts, because of the nature of the way I've taken them.
Right, and what fascinates me about that is I've written extensively about how my belief is that spirits exist, or whatever a spirit is, that's a completely different discussion, exist outside of our perceptive range, which is only 0.05% of the light spectrum, and there's so much that we can't perceive in the world around us. So when you're developing these pieces of technology that allow you to see outside of that range, you're capturing stuff that with your naked eye you wouldn't see, but with these kind of ultraviolet cameras that you're developing, it enables you to see so much more. Do you have that where you can categorically say, I could see nothing there, but the camera has captured something?
That's happened on quite a few occasions, that you don't see anything. You might get an inclination of a shadowy movement or something like that. In fact, that happened with the soldier picture at the Old King's Head, that we heard a noise, we didn't know what it was. I jumped up and started taking photos. My colleague Steve was in the foreground of this photo with the soldier. He didn't see him at the time. They were literally standing side by side in the building. What I want to go on to develop, and this is just technology that's sort of on my to-do list, but I've got lots and lots to do, is imagine if you're an investigator and you started to feel there was someone or something around you. We've all been there, we've all done that, but it goes nowhere because you can't prove or disprove what it is you're sensing or feeling. So I would like on investigation to be able to put a piece of kit in your hand and then it senses any energy changes within you. Basically electromagnetic, but it could be just electric field.
Right.
Hook that back up to a light system by my camera via a cable. It has to be a cable link. I can't do it remote, wireless. Via a cable. And then you wander around and you say, I'm feeling a bit unusual here. I'm sensing a presence. And then I start taking photographs, because the light that's being projected at you through the system would be based on any change in vibration or change in energy that you were sensing or giving off. So that's just one of the things I want to develop.
So your change in feeling or your change in energy, it triggers the photograph to be taken automatically. Is that what you're saying?
Not triggers. I could do it that way, but I would prefer to work with a person to say,
right.
if you were in a room with me and you said, look, I just feel something's unusual here, I'll say, right, hold the sensor, stay still. While you're doing this, do a call out, and at that time I'll be snapping photos of you. But the light that's being projected at you will be based on your energy field or an energy field close to you, depending on how I instruct you to use the device.
Wow.
then see if anything unusual turns up on the photos. And there's several different types of sensor I can use for that, but that's one that I want to get underway and get using as well.
Right. I mean, this stuff fascinates me, and because my regular listeners will know that I harp on so much about how the investigative field on a whole, I believe, has become very stale. It's plateaued. We use the same equipment all the time. We ask the same questions. We don't really look at furthering our kind of experiments and how we can get more evidence for what we do. And when I get to talk to someone like yourself who is actively looking for new ways to contact these energies and new ways to use the person who is investigating, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think that's an area that people haven't been able to tackle or make use of, because I said before, many of us have been in locations where we felt something different. We say we feel an energy around us, or a static field, or hot or cold, and I would like to be able to use the person themselves as the sensor. But that obviously requires a bit of clever electronics to do that, but it's all doable. It does, and I would say that, and something I've argued again quite a lot, is that the best piece of equipment you can use is yourself, because you can trust yourself. As you say, these K2 meters, we've had walkie-talkies in a group when it's been a rather large location, and it took an hour to realise that the K2 was being triggered by the walkie-talkie every time it kicked in. So it can give you so many false readings, but only you know what you're seeing and what you're feeling as an individual. So if you can trust yourself and then use that kind of change in feeling to trigger what you're talking about here, it's a real good kind of amalgamation of that, using your own body and using the best piece of equipment for that particular scenario. Because what happens is we use these pieces of equipment and it's kind of one size fits all.
Yes.
We take the K2 to different locations, so we're using the same equipment all the time, expecting different results, but it never really happens, So I think it's brilliant what you're doing. Where do you stand on mobile phone apps? Because again, I moan a lot about these, and I had a recent experience on an investigation with another group. I was a paying guest, and every minute essentially of this investigation, at least two people in the group had their heads buried in this phone, which was illuminating the room with the light of the phone, which was ruining the atmosphere, and it was so clearly fake. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm probably going to be in great agreement with you. My explanation is a mobile phone app. One of two things: they can either access a database built into the app of pre-recorded words, or they're a radio channel skipping type device. So if it's accessing the database of words, they are pre-spoken words, pre-programmed by a person in a computer program. In my view, that doesn't relate to a spirit speaking or giving out information, in my view. A channel skipping radio skips from frequency to frequency. Every so often it picks up a word, but that is a word transmitted by a presenter from a studio somewhere in a radio station, not a spirit or a ghost. There are a couple of devices around that are starting to get more and more use. I just wrote the names down because I forget. Geobox and Geoports, those types of things. Now, I looked at those with great interest, and I thought to myself, I'll investigate how they work and what goes on with them. Most of them are channel skipping radios, but then they applied that to a reverb type circuit. So it re-echoes anything that's heard, mostly. So I'm making one of these for myself, but mine won't have a channel skipping radio. I'm going to use one of two other sensor systems. One will be an ordinary microphone, and the other will be something I use in other equipment, is a little pot of quartz and pyrite, which is fool's gold. And when you apply a voltage to these, not high voltage, but when you apply voltage, they vibrate. Quartz vibrates. So this then makes a white noise type sound. So I can tap into that white noise and then apply that to my gearbox type circuitry and see if anything comes of it. Now, this is so new, it is literally not even in a box yet. I've just tested the circuit on the bench literally a couple of days ago. So that's all to play for. That's something quite new. But I can't talk about this too much because I recorded for a TV program that hasn't been broadcast yet. But something happened on that evening. You'll see it when it comes out. The extraordinary thing is the person that's with me said that the sound that we heard, and I heard it as well, it has been recorded on the camera mics, didn't come from the usual source that was expected. So we've got to investigate a little bit further on that, because this was in the Old King's Head, and I know the building very well, I know the sounds, and I'm hoping we can just do a small follow-up on that, because it's turning quite interesting. So
can you reveal a little bit more about the show, what it's called, or?
It will be on Paranormal Captured.
Right. Okay.
I've done bits before with them, and this was a whole show dedicated at the Old King's Head. So you will see that probably in a month or so's time.
Brilliant.
I think they've just finished editing, and the other presenter with me, it was his investigation really, Danny Moss. Some people will have heard. And he contacted me a couple of days ago, and I'm not going to reveal what he's told me because it hasn't been broadcast yet. It wouldn't be fair.
Yeah,
but
of course.
It's more unusual than we first thought on the night, let's say.
Brilliant. Be sure to send me a link to that show once it comes out, and I'll put it on the podcast page for our listeners, because some guys are, if they're living in a different country, they might not be able to see it. So, but yeah, look forward to that.
Even that event, you see, leading on from that event, and then the Geoport type device I'm building, which has got a different sensor system. To me, I'm saying, yes, that's an interesting way to go. So this is why I pushed forward on making that.
Yeah, I mean, to make the equipment that you're making, because you seem to be going down a route that I would go down if I had the talent that you clearly have. Do you have a belief or a theory on what spirits are? Because I believe when you have a theory on what they are, that is what helps dictate the type of equipment that you're making. Do you know what I mean? So what is your theory? What is it that fuels the equipment that you make?
Good question. Two sides to the answer. Well, the first one we've covered a little bit, as in to produce a piece of equipment that you could have, and then I could project light towards you. That's something that doesn't exist at the moment, and I want to push forward with that. I think that's a very interesting way to go. As far as photography and video is concerned, my belief is a ghost is electrical by nature. So it's a vibrating energy form, but we can't see it. Its vibration is different to what our eyesight is. By projecting either modulated light or critically just ultraviolet light, but preferably modulated, so the light that I'm projecting is vibrating, will add energy to that electrical energy field, which is the ghost or spirit. And by throwing energy at it, you're providing a way of illuminating it. That's my belief within how my photos have turned out anyway, because I've got quite a few interesting photos. The spirits, slightly different, because I think the spirit and the soul are the same thing. Our soul and our spirit are the same. It's just that when we're alive, we are the soul and the spirit. When we pass over, all this thick stuff that we're made of just disappears, and the soul or the spirit lives on. It's still an energy form and has very little ability to talk or communicate. So I want to be able to add different kind of, well, portal is an odd word, but a device that makes it easier for a very low energy to be heard. So you're detecting and amplifying, but that means you have to try different alternative methods than's already being done. Again, vibrating quartz is one thing. Using light itself is another thing, because it's a very, very high frequency. A friend I was talking to just recently, she was talking about asking me the same questions you are asking about technology. And I said, well, I've got a circuit that I haven't boxed up yet that will convert higher frequency voice down into lower frequency voice. So it's a back converter. That, if you can imagine what that is, high frequency down to low, and apply that to paranormal investigation. But with that, I will have quite a lot of different settings because I don't know what frequencies to aim for. But that is one that will, say, essentially turn audio in a room from a high frequency into a much lower one. Hopefully we'll hear or be able to record something.
Right. So what you've done there is you've kind of differentiated between what a human spirit is, essentially. So are you saying that what we capture when you're capturing your photos, that they aren't actually the spirit of a dead person? Are you saying that that's some entity that has never existed within a human body but does exist
No, they are most definitely people that have once existed. They are in a form that we can't see with our naked eye. I'll give you an example in a minute. But you need to apply energy for us to be able to see them. I think they're around us a lot of the time, if not all the time. Right. An example of this was in Plazteg about 2 years ago. There was a group of people there, and it's quite a big sprawling property. And in one particular room, there was just 3 of us. And we were all standing behind the camera. And I'm snapping away, taking photos. But at the time, there was a lady who, I don't like the term particularly medium, but medium or sensitive. She was one of those, and she was calling out, and she was saying she could feel a presence in the room. I was calling out to the person who I believe has got a historical connection in spirit to the room. And I'm snapping and taking photographs, but I didn't see anything at the time. And there was no living person in front of the camera. But on one of the photos, you can quite clearly see a head sticking out from a mirror about a foot out distant from the mirror. Very faint outline of torso, but you can see a head and a face. You can make out the face of a living person or was once a living person. So, it's not an easy question to answer because I don't think we know all the answers yet. But that's what we have to strive for, is keep on pushing on with it.
Do you believe that there's a possibility that they are the spirits of dead people, but what you're actually doing by tuning into these frequencies is you're tuning into a different time, maybe, and you're actually capturing them at their moment of life?
Yes.
So there's almost like a time slip, and you're seeing them not as a dead as they once were, but you're actually seeing them alive.
Yes. 2 examples of that. One is the one I just talked about in Plazteg. That person, I believe it to be, would have existed about 350 years ago. Another more recent incident was in the Old King's Head, and there was only 3 of us investigating in the large room at the back of the pub upstairs. And it has been speculated and rumoured that at one time this part of this building was used by ladies of the night. And we don't know that for sure. We still don't know that for sure, but there's still a strong belief that's what's happened. Anyway, one of my colleagues was sitting down, and we were generally discussing use of the room at the time. And he'd been doing a little bit of research, and he was talking in some detail about this use of this room. And I'm standing about 10 foot away from him, snapping away and taking photos. There were about 4 or 5 unusual photos where the room had actually changed. There were curtains in the room where there aren't ever been curtains in my time that I've been there. You can see curtains flapping about and a curtainy shape behind him as well. And I actually missed them. He pointed them out a couple of weeks later. But the most interesting part was, and it's important to link it with Ladies of the Night, there's a photograph of the lower half of a young lady sitting, legs crossed, short skirt, knees. And this is what we call a legs photo. Now, in context, he's talking and sort of making a connection. I would say he's making a connection. But the technical side is, when I snap and take photos, I always like to take at least 3 photos in one direction. It gives me a before, the shot, and then after. So I've got photos before and after. And there was nothing on those 2 shots either side. So for a moment in time, I believe this young lady came into existence. Now, was it to do with him talking about her? That's what I suspect it is. There was a consciousness connection.
Yeah.
So I strongly believe that.
And you say that she came into existence. I would probably look at it more as she was always there. She was there doing her daily business. It's just that you kind of witnessed it for a brief moment in time. And when you look at, you say about how curtains have appeared, I mean, that's fantastic, because people often associate, spirits with a living being. I recently interviewed a guy on this show, Marcus, who witnessed an actual ghost train with people on the train, but he actually saw the train itself. And it went down a particular, it came kind of across a grassy field. There were no train tracks, but the train was going. And in order for that to happen, if you only believe that spirits were once living beings, then you can't see the spirit of an inanimate object or a curtain or a train. So the only thing I can explain there is time. It is a time slip, and you're witnessing that moment in time, and it's happening, and it will happen every day for eternity, and you've just happened to see it. Do you think that's happening all around us?
Yes, but I think a lot of us, especially these days in the era we live in now, we don't look for it and we miss it. It's too easy to miss. I think when you become a little bit more in tuned with, I won't say in tuned with the spirit world, but if you're more open and accustomed to something going on around you, you're probably more likely to have an experience. But definitely the time thing, I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently, the legs photo, because that wasn't that far back in time. That photo, I would say, relates to no more than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Civil War soldier, he was 60, 45-ish during the Civil War. That's hundreds of years. So I know people have speculated about time slippage, but in my view, that is two real examples that does actually happen. And it starts to make your brain work very hard because, you get scientific people say time travel isn't possible. But in my view, there is something going on. All science, until science understands a phenomena, they don't acknowledge it existed. But once you understand it and it exists and you can prove it, it's like before the microscope was invented, we didn't know about germs. They were always there, but we just didn't know because we couldn't see them. You invent the microscope and all of a sudden there are germs. It's just we haven't quite got there yet with the kit. That's what I'm pushing for, is always new technology.
I think it's like that old joke, before Isaac Newton discovered gravity, people used to just float everywhere, I think what the only thing that pulls me back on this theory, because like yourself, it's something I've been exploring, basically the idea of two not two, but multiple timelines existing all at the same time. And that would mean that time isn't actually linear. It would mean that we had this conversation yesterday and we'll have it tomorrow and on again. The only thing that pulls me back on that is it's very rare that you have a time slip into the future.
Yes.
We always see the past, and you read stories about, there's a famous one of two ladies walking down the street and all of a sudden they're surrounded by kind of Victorian people and horses and carriages and stuff, and then they're back into the 20th century. But it never happens the other way around. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, my explanation would be that tomorrow hasn't yet happened, but yesterday did happen. You existed yesterday, you ate your dinner and tea yesterday, you can remember doing that. It exists as a memory, as an energy, however you want to describe it. But tomorrow hasn't yet happened. So I don't believe in time travel into the future, but grasping times that have gone on in the past. And I don't think you can alter it either. I think time is what has happened in the past has happened. I don't believe we could go back into the past and change it. Could be wrong, but that's for science fiction. But no, I agree with you. I've not witnessed anything from a future, no.
No, and like I say, it always just pulls me back and makes me stop getting ahead of myself, to excuse the pun, but about the fact that if people did start to experience the future in time slips, I think it would pretty much cement what we're talking about as a solid theory, really, and something for science to look at.
Well, I think it ties in with the stone tape theory that it's loosely attached to quartz in stones and rocks that our buildings are made out of. And quartz can vibrate. You apply electricity to quartz, it vibrates. If you strike quartz, it produces electricity, vice versa. And therefore, it has got the potential to capture and hold energy, which could be memories, thoughts, events, if you think in spiritual terms, not in physical terms. So work it that way. And I think, there's a great possibility. But how do you release a stone tape theory event? You apply energy to it. And that could be, well, in my view, it would be people being present in a location. That you have to be there for the event to re-happen, let's say, in my view.
Yeah. And do you think there's different types of spirits then, really? Because you will have this stone tape theory, which is something I do subscribe to. If let's say you live in a house and you walk up and down the stairs 4 or 5 times a day for 40 years, it's going to kind of imprint some kind of energy on that building. And, famous places like Auschwitz, when you go there, you get a feeling, of course. And I've had it myself. I've been in rooms where I've had really negative feelings, and you do a bit of research and you find out why you felt like that. So I massively subscribe to that. And that might explain why sometimes you can encounter ghosts or spirits that don't look at you. They don't interact with you because they're just going about their business.
Yes,
But then there's that different side, isn't there? There's that where the spirit begins to interact with you. And that's no longer a recording because it's kind of breaking out of that mold and it's interacting with the world now. So how would you explain that?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, but I'll give you an example of something.
I'm sorry.
It's quite right. If we don't ask the hard questions, we're never going to.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've focused a lot on short burst EVP recordings, and I use a specialized bit of kit, but quite short recordings, 30 seconds, a minute, because then you can play them back and it doesn't take forever. You're listening in real time on an invest. And I've done this a couple of times, but once again, I spent so much time in the King's Head, I always revert back there. One night I built a new piece of kit, and it was the first time I'd used it. It was a box with quartz and pyrite in it, and it was energized. And the output from that came to an audio amplifier, so you could hear anything from it. There was no microphone in this at all. It's just the quartz that is the catalyst sensor. And then I had this recorder with me, and I use 6 microphones attached to the recorder, not just one. And again, it increases the potential of recording. And I was going through the routine, and I said, I'm talking to spirit now and recording. I'm saying, I've just altered a couple of the settings on this box. Does that help? And a very whispery voice, but audio voice, came back and said, Sound Seeker. Now, when you're doing audio recordings, you call out, which you're asking for people's name, is there anyone, all these kind of questions. That's what you're calling out for. You're asking for sounds to come back. And it was a literal answer to what we were doing. So that was a curious one, but that was in real time. You could say that was actually conscious. It was recognizing I was there, present at the time, and it was answering me in a way. Another example of that in another room in the King's Head. Again, one of my team, Mandy, she heard a sound in one of the bathrooms. So we don't jump. We immediately react and say, is there someone there with us? Let us know that you're here. And we're recording at this time. So we did about a minute's worth of recording. I think Mandy was talking at the time, wasn't me? And when we played it back, as an investigator, you do your best politely to encourage the spirits to talk to you. So she was doing that. Please let us know who you are. We want to hear you. On the playback, we heard, "Okay, Curious, Earl Spencer." Seriously, these are recorded words. Now, the first part, "Okay, Curious," is an interaction. It's a real-time interaction.
Quite sarcastic as well. Has a bit of a personality to it.
Well, from further investigations, much more recently, he appears to be not such a nice character.
Right.
But we can't find any historic connection. But to actually get Earl Spencer, that's not an Earl as in the Earl of Wessex. That is Earl as a first name.
Yeah.
Can't find any historical connection yet to anybody in the building. But I was fascinated that we got not only the first name but the surname as well.
Yeah, it's when you get those kind of intelligent responses back. That's what fascinates me the most, because, like I say, I can subscribe to the stone tape theory, and I think you can to a point scientifically explain how that can happen, as you've mentioned with the quartz and the vibration and stuff like that. But when you start to look at the intelligent responses and that kind of interaction, it's a whole new level. And I think that's where we need to go next, and where we need to focus our research and trying to explain what that is.
Well, you see, I think we should be looking at the fact science often says energy can never be created or destroyed, so it always exists. So if we acknowledge that us two that are talking to each other are physical human beings, but we're spirits in a human body, and that spirit has got energy that never dies. It exists even after the human body dies. And our spirits that are talking to each other now are conscious. We can think, we can speak, we can discuss. So if a spirit energy continues after life, then why has it not got conscious ability to communicate? And I think it has. If we interact in the right way, if we're polite, and if we show, I'm going to say we show respect, but I think by showing respect, by being polite, you're actually passing on a bit of energy by inviting them to communicate and talk to you. You're probably like me, don't believe in being aggressive or using or anything like that. It doesn't work for me at all. Never ever.
No, it doesn't work. I mean, I've seen it work, but I've seen it get that kind of response back. You kind of get the negative, horrible kind of spirit that you're interacting with then, and it's not very nice. It's not the approach I tend to go for. I always talk to them how I would want to be spoken to, as a living person.
That's an example I always say. Talk to the spirits as if it was a living person sitting next to you, because they were once living people. I just want to throw a question back to you.
Sure.
In America, they talk about demons quite a lot, and we don't seem to make much connection with demons in this country. And personally, I don't particularly believe in evil. I believe there's evil in people, but not evil as such. What's your thoughts on demons? Why have they got that backwards?
Okay, for the listeners, this still is the Paranormal podcast, and I think there is evil. I think the universe has balance. So that's my answer to that. I think where there has to be evil to highlight the goodness, and there has to be goodness to highlight the evil. I think in terms of why are the Americans always finding demons, I would put this down to it's something I tackle actually quite in some of my presentations, that we're always obsessed with the darkness, the dark side of things. When you look at Hollywood, you never see a positive film about ghosts. It's always kind of horror, and they mean you harm. And this is exemplified when you go to on investigations in the UK, and one of the questions people always ask is, do you mean us harm? And it's like, that's the first thing on their mind, that these spirits are there to hurt them. And I think in America, and this is no kind of disrespect to any of my American listeners whatsoever, but it's always hinges on the entertainment industry in America. I think where we had Most Haunted and things like that, in America they have, it's much bigger with ghost hunters, ghost adventures, and I think fear sells. And I think that therefore a lot of the demons that they're encountering they're either fake, I don't think they're actually happening, or they are encountering a spirit, but the encounter is twisted and manipulated to look more evil, because that sells. If they encountered good old Jeff, who is just there reading his paper in the corner of the living room, it's not as interesting as encountering some ancient archaic demon who means to possess you and take over the world. So that I does that answer?
It does. I mean, the reason I'm saying is because I mentioned this to someone the other day. I have never been anywhere that I have ever wanted to leave in a hurry. There is no place that I've been frightened of. I have felt very strong presences in places, but I wouldn't put it down to demons. I would just put it down to a strong spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a strong spirit that usually would say wants to make you aware of their presence, but doesn't mean you any evil.
No, I'd have to agree.
I just think they want to get a point across and say, I'm here. And
I think so. I mean, I do stand by what I said, where that it does sell, and I think America is a platform where it sells well. And therefore, the demon thing is massively kind of, it's a bandwagon essentially that's being ridden on a lot.
And I'll just say, I don't mean any disrespect to anyone in America. It's just a curious question that, as an investigator in this country, I'm not particularly aware of coming across anything within demons or demonology. And as you say, it is probably almost certainly focused because it sells and it's scare factor.
I think so, and it's interesting because when I back when we could, I used to give presentations to groups, and sometimes I would take equipment with me, and I would get the spirit board out, and you'd see the people on the front row. All of a sudden, they'd be sat on the back row, and it always fascinated me, and I just asked why. Why are you scared of this piece of wood with letters carved into it? And their answer would be, well, I've seen films, and and that's it. It's essentially a piece of equipment to communicate with a spirit, and just the same as we use cameras and we use things like K2 meters and stuff. It's just a tool for a spirit to communicate with you. It isn't a portal to hell. I've never had a bad experience on a spirit board, and again, no disrespect to the people that have. But I could, if for every person that's had a bad experience on a spirit board, you could probably give someone that's had a bad experience with an EVP recorder and stuff like that. So I think a spirit board gets an unfair rap when it comes to equipment. So what would you say is your best piece of equipment? And it can be one you've made, it can be one off the shelf. What's your favourite piece to use?
Well, it can't just be one. There has to be a few. When I go out on invests, it's usually 2 aluminium cases and a couple of bags of things. But one is the lighting equipment. I call it digital lighting, the pulse digital lighting. I have a fairly, not an expensive, but a fairly high spec digital SLR. And critically, the ability to use it properly, that makes a big difference as well. The audio recordings I find fascinating, especially if you get a response in real time that makes sense if it's an answer to a question. Very rare, but very, very interesting. I've got equipment that can react, so they are sensitive to electric fields or magnetic fields or electric vibration that turn anything they sense into audio. So you've got the potential of hearing it rather than just looking at an LED display. That was never enough for me. I need to be able to hear it. And if it comes out as audio, then it's recordable. So one of my prime criteria when I started out was to make equipment that you could make recordings from, whether it's video, photo, or audio EVP. So yeah, there's a couple of bits of kit that I wouldn't go out the house without. I do have bog standard EMF type devices. And I've got one that I haven't really taken out and used anywhere, but again, it's got an EMF sensor. Well, there's 2 sensors and a light unit at the front. Right. So you can walk around and there's a telescopic section. So it pokes out about 1 meter in front of you and it will project light relative to whatever it senses. But
so it's like a visual version of I guess a REM pod. So instead of hearing it, you're seeing the light.
Well, it's audio as well, so you'd hear it. I actually designed it. It's just another interest of mine is to take it around some of the large stone circles in this country. Avebury, I don't think I'd get into Stonehenge, some burial chambers. I've had a couple of interesting experiences there, but to use those to detect if there's any electromagnetic or electric vibration and to reproject that back into light and listen to the audio. So that was the idea behind that one, but it's relative to ghost hunting as well.
Right. Okay. And this equipment do you say you designed this EMF meter basically that kind of makes sound instead of light? Do you make these to sell? Is there anywhere people can buy these, or do they just have to ask you to make one?
No, I've only ever sold a few. I haven't made any to sell for a long, long time. I'm not a very good entrepreneur. I am quite a typical British designer. I tend to build things that I want to use myself and then not see it through as a business as such. I really should do, because as you've just said, we need improvements, and improvements need new equipment to get us to these places. So perhaps that should be my route for the future, really.
Definitely, yeah. Well, expect a message off me commissioning you to make a few things. I think I can see myself going down that route. And really just kind of rounding off the interview. Where can people the photos that you've captured and the audio EVP recordings sound fascinating? Can we hear those anywhere? Can we see those? Have you archived them?
I've archived them. Some of them are on my Facebook page, but you'd have to trawl back through those. I've got a Facebook page called Paradox Paranormal, and there will be, I put all the relevant pictures that I get on there. I don't think I've put all the audio recordings on there, but Paradox Paranormal on Facebook is probably the first place, and you can message me through there if anyone needs any more information. And I can't remember if there was one photo I took recently which hasn't been put up there, but the legs photo will definitely be on there.
Brilliant.
And the Plas Teg one definitely want to look out because that's a fascinating one.
Okay, and with restrictions hopefully lifting soon, have you got any planned investigations that maybe some of the UK-based listeners could come and join you on?
I'm pretty regular at the Old King's Head. Plas Teg is under renovation at the moment. I've been going there for many, many years. So only Old King's Head at the moment. I haven't really made any plans because of the COVID restrictions. Yeah. So you can't plan to do anything because you don't know when things are going to be open properly. No. There will be one in Vernon Institute in Sorgel in July with another group that I'm attending. But again, that's not definite yet. We have to wait for the COVID. But as soon as things open up, I hope to be able to do more.
Great. And do you advertise these events? Sometimes you say that the public can come. Is there anywhere people can keep an eye on to see? The King's Head will have its own website soon. We haven't really done anything yet because we're waiting until things are opened up fully. The Old King's Head hasn't really been open for investigations before because of paying guests that come and slept in the rooms. Yeah. All that changed. So if you want somewhere different and unusual to investigate and work alongside me, see equipment in use, that's the place to come and join me there. Brilliant. I guess that just leaves me to say thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, it's been as fascinating as I expected it to be. So you've certainly lived up to it. And I did like the role reversal.
I'm not sure what I have to live up to because I just go out there and be me, you see, but I've just got such an inquisitive mind and it just
that's great. I mean, honestly, it's, as I say, the whole field has very much gone stale. It's plateaued. It's not really going anywhere. So to meet characters who are doing the best they can to further it, I think is brilliant, and I commend all that you do. I think it's great. So thank you very much for coming on, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
You're most welcome. I hope so too. Yes, thank you.
So that was the interview there with Paul. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a really good interview for me, that, because I really like to talk to people that are trying to change the game where paranormal investigations are concerned. As I've said so many times, and I said in that interview there that, I do believe the field has become stale. As a whole, in general, it has become stale. And there's not many people trying to push it forward, not many people looking at it from a different angle. But it seems that Paul is one of the very few that is, and I think that's fantastic. And I appreciate everything that he's doing in that sense. And I do look forward to hopefully being able to team up with him in the future and maybe joining him on an investigation at the Old King's Head in Chester. It's as I said again in the interview, I went there with my wife when we were in Chester a while back, and it's a nice little pub. And I remember seeing that they did ghost hunts there and ghost investigations, and I made a point of wanting to go back. Unfortunately, it's just never happened, and maybe this is synchronicity and this is my chance to go back. So I'll certainly be keeping in touch with Paul about joining him there. And of course, as always, when I do go on an investigation, I'll feed it back to you guys and let you know how it went and put any evidence up on the group. So just as I mentioned in the intro, I'm looking at giving away a copy of my book, a signed copy, as I did with my previous book. So there's going to be a little bit of a competition. It's not necessarily a competition. It's more of what I guess you'd call a raffle. So what I want you guys to do as listeners is to drop me an email at paranormalparadigmpodcast@gmail.com, or you can email me at kieran.woodhouse gmail.com. If you feel like you want to message me through Facebook, feel free to do so as well. But once you message me, what I will do is I will come back to you and I will allocate you a number. It will be a random number, and that will essentially be your raffle ticket then. And then in 2 shows' time, or on the next show, or whenever I feel like I've got enough people that have entered, I'll do, although it won't be live, but whilst recording, I'll do a random draw, and we'll select one of the numbers, and whoever number that belongs to, you will receive a free signed copy of my book. I'll just have to get back in touch with you to find your postal address. So drop me an email at kieran.woodhouse@gmail.com or paranormalparadigmpodcast@gmail.com, or you can message me on Facebook if you feel like that's the best way to do it, and I'll come back to you with a number. And obviously I'll keep a track of all the numbers as well. And then once I feel like I've had enough people enter, it'll be about in a couple of shows' time. So probably about a month after this show has aired, I will then do a not so live draw on that podcast, and we will find the winner. So good luck to everyone if you're going to enter. Look forward to hearing from you. It'll be interesting to see where I get the emails from, because previous communications with you guys, it fascinates me where you're all listening from. It really, really does. And as always, I really do appreciate the support that you guys give just by listening to the podcast. Really, I think it's brilliant. The next guest I have, Kenny Irish, is coming on to discuss cryptids, monsters, Bigfoot, stuff like that. He's a cryptopunkologist, and is a fascinating character. I did an interview with him as part of the Keep On Chatting network. They do a festival. It was the Festival of the Unexplained, you guys might remember, and I interviewed him for the Winter Festival. And it was at that time I asked if he'd be interested in coming on this show, and he agreed. So that will be the next show. So until then, look after yourselves and take care.